Welcome back to the channel, folks, where we dive into the wild, wonderful world of men transforming into women in all kinds of fascinating ways. If that's your vibe, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Now let's jump right into today's story.
Epilogue version 2.0. 6 months later, Nicole Wolf's life was almost unrecognizable, and for the first time, that was a good thing. The California sunshine bathed the Elmore Tech campus in golden light as Nicole navigated the familiar paths between buildings with practiced ease. She walked through the sprawling grounds with a confidence that was still new, but growing every day, a sway to her hips that no longer felt forced, a poise that came from months of inhabiting this body rather than fighting against it. Her hair was longer now, falling in auburn waves past her shoulders, styled in loose curls that caught the light when she moved. Her wardrobe was no longer borrowed emergency items from Brian's sister or desperate department store selections. She developed her own sense of style, a mix of professional sleekness and comfortable femininity. Today, she wore a sage green dress that hugged her curves before flaring at the hips, paired with a fitted blazer and heels that added 3 inches to her height. And she could even walk briskly in those heels without looking like a newborn deer finding its legs. Running, still a work in progress, usually ending with colorful curses and occasional public embarrassment. At her side was Laura, resplendent in a tailored pantsuit, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob that framed her face perfectly. She laughed as Nicole recounted Brian's latest failed attempt at gender-bending VR, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that still made Nicole's heart skip. "You should have seen him," Nicole insisted, gesturing wildly. "He got stuck as a grandma for 3 hours. I've never seen so much bingo. And the knitting, he kept trying to code with the needles." Laura doubled over, clutching her side. "Stop, I can't breathe." She wiped tears of mirth from her eyes. "Please tell me there are pictures." "Only about 50, Nicole confirmed with a wicked grin. "I've been saving them for the company Christmas party. Thought we could use them for the slideshow." "You're evil," Laura said admiringly. "I love it." Nicole preened under the praise, still marveling at how easy it was now to accept compliments, to revel in Laura's approval. As Nick, compliments had always made him uncomfortable, unsure how to respond. But Nicole had discovered that her new body came with unexpected social upgrades, a newfound ease with banter, an ability to read emotional cues that had once been mysterious code. "Speaking of evil," Nicole lowered her voice conspiratorially, "did you see the email from HR about the new dress code? Apparently someone complained about my hemlines again." Laura rolled her eyes. "Let me guess, Henderson from accounting." "Who else? The man's been clutching his pearls since I showed up with these." Nicole gestured to her chest with a melodramatic flourish. "Not my fault the buttons on Oxford shirts weren't designed for girls with assets. Henderson's just jealous because you fill out a sweater better than his wife," Laura said with a snort. Their relationship had blossomed into something fierce and tender in the months since Nicole's confession. Those first weeks had been a roller coaster, Laura processing the implications, Nicole learning to navigate her new reality, both of them figuring out what it meant to rebuild their connection on this strange new foundation. There were still moments of uncertainty, awkward pauses when memories of Nick surfaced, old habits that no longer fit, new insecurities that bloomed without warning. But they met each one with honesty, laughter, and the occasional midnight ice cream run when words failed them both. Nicole marveled at how Laura saw her, not as a project or a curiosity, but simply as herself, version 2. Laura had an uncanny ability to recognize the core of who Nicole was, beyond the physical transformation, while still appreciating all the new facets that had emerged. "What's that smile about?" Laura asked, catching Nicole's expression as they approached the main building. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," Nicole admitted, the honesty still sometimes surprising her. As Nick, such sentiments would have remained safely locked away, too vulnerable to voice. Laura's expression softened. "Sap," she accused, but her voice was warm. They passed Brian in the lobby, hunched over his phone with unusual intensity. He looked up as they approached, his face brightening. "Ladies, just the dynamic duo I was looking for." He shoved his phone in his pocket and fell into step beside them. "I've got news." "If it's about the new coffee machine, we already know," Laura said. "The memo went out this morning." Brian waved dismissively. "Please, that's old news. This is about something much more important." He paused dramatically. "My sister's getting married to a woman who looks eerily like Nicole." Nicole nearly tripped over her own feet. "What? When did this happen?" "Last night, apparently," Brian said with obvious delight. "Remember all those clothes you borrowed when you first changed? Well, turns out my sister has a type, and you, my friend, are it." Laura burst out laughing. "The plot thickens. Does she know about?" She gestured vaguely at Nicole's entire being. "God, no," Brian said, eyes widening in horror. "Can you imagine that conversation? 'Hey sis, remember those clothes you left at my place? Yeah, they fit my buddy who magically transformed into a hot woman and now you're marrying her doppelganger.'" He shuddered dramatically. "Some secrets need to stay in the family, and by family, I mean us three and no one with actual biological ties to me." Brian, ever the agent of chaos, had become Nicole's biggest supporter and co-conspirator in the months since her transformation. Where others might have balked at the impossibility of it all, Brian had simply adjusted his worldview to include spontaneous gender transformation in the list of things that could happen to a person, right alongside bad haircuts and food poisoning. The VR prototype that had started it all was now locked in a secure R&D safe, with a handwritten sign taped to the front reading, "Warning, may cause excessive self-discovery and fabulous hair." The company's official report listed the incident as anomalous user interface outcomes, pending further study. Brian called it the best bug ever. "Speaking of secrets," Nicole said as they reached the elevator, "any luck with the reverse engineering?" Brian shook his head. "Nothing conclusive. I've gone through every line of code in that thing, and it's just standard VR programming. No transform user into bombshell subroutine hidden anywhere." He shrugged. Elmore's still being cagey about the whole thing. The enigmatic Mr. Elmore had been frustratingly vague when they'd finally tracked him down. "The technology responds to the user's deepest needs," he'd said cryptically. "It manifests what was always there, just beneath the surface." When pressed for details on how to reverse the process, he'd merely smiled and said, "Why would you want to go backward when forward is so much more interesting?" Nicole's transformation had never reversed. After a few months of waking up every morning with a momentary panic, checking to see if her body had changed back overnight, she eventually stopped waiting for it to happen. She realized she didn't need to choose between past and future. She could be both Nick and Nicole, wiser for the journey, open to everything that came next. "Probably for the best," Laura said, pressing the button for their floor. "Can you imagine if that technology went public? The chaos, the identity crises, the run on Victoria's Secret." "The lingerie industry would make billions," Nicole agreed, thinking of her own initial shock at the price of a decent bra. "Though men would finally understand why women are always complaining about underwire." Brian snorted. "I understood that after 3 minutes in that grandma body, everything pinched, everything." The elevator doors opened, revealing the familiar bustle of their department. Nicole stepped out, immediately greeted by waves and smiles from coworkers who had adjusted to her new appearance with varying degrees of confusion, curiosity, and ultimately acceptance. The official story, that Nick had taken an extended leave for personal reasons, and his cousin Nicole had joined the team, was flimsy at best, but most people were too polite to question it openly. "Lunch later?" Laura asked as they prepared to split up for their respective meetings. Nicole nodded. 1 o'clock, I should be done with the client call by then." "Perfect." Laura squeezed her hand briefly, a small gesture of affection that sent warmth spreading through Nicole's chest. Even after months together, Laura's touch still had that effect, a spark of connection that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. The day passed in a blur of meetings, coding sessions, and the usual office drama. By late afternoon, Nicole's feet were protesting the heels, and she was more than ready for a break. She found herself drifting toward the rooftop terrace, her favorite spot to clear her head when the walls of the office felt too confining. The door to the roof was propped open with a brick, a common occurrence on nice days. Nicole stepped out into the golden light of late afternoon, the city spread before her in a panorama of glass, steel, and distant hills. The air smelled of urban heat and the faint sweetness of someone's rooftop garden several buildings over. She wasn't alone. Laura stood at the railing, silhouetted against the glowing sky, her profile sharp and lovely in the fading light. "Fancy meeting you here," Nicole said, moving to join her at the edge. Laura turned, her smile immediate and warm. "Great minds think alike. Needed a breather." Henderson was mansplaining databases again, Nicole confirmed with an eye roll. "I figured it was either come up here or demonstrate exactly how much upper body strength I retained through the transformation." Laura laughed. "I would pay good money to see that, actually." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the sky began its slow transition from blue to pink, the clouds catching fire at their edges. Below them, the city pulsed with end-of-day energy, people streaming from buildings, cars creeping through congested streets. Laura nudged her gently with an elbow. "Do you ever miss it, being Nick?" The question wasn't new. They'd circled it many times in the past months, examining it from different angles, finding new nuances each time. Nicole thought about it, giving the question the consideration it deserved. She thought about Nick's life, the simplicity of jeans and t-shirts, the ease of moving through the world without being constantly observed, evaluated, commented upon. The straightforward interactions, the assumptions of competence, the comfort of familiar terrain. Then she thought about all that had come after, the richness of emotion, the depth of connection, the freedom to express feelings that Nick had kept tightly contained. The exhilaration of discovering a new self, the joy of loving without restraint. She shook her head, certain in her answer. "No, maybe I miss the simplicity, the invisibility, but I wouldn't trade this." She gestured between them, encompassing all that had grown in the wake of her transformation. "Not for anything." Laura grinned, her expression softening with affection. "Good, because I like you just the way you are, flaws, quirks, and all." "Even the part where I still can't figure out eyeliner?" Nicole asked, touching the corner of her eye where she knew her morning attempt had gone slightly awry. "Especially that part," Laura confirmed. "It's endearing." Nicole smiled, feeling that old flutter of nerves, now tinged with joy rather than anxiety. She reached for Laura's hand, their fingers twining together in the fading light. The contact was grounding, a reminder that amidst all the strangeness and wonder of the past months, this connection was real and solid. "Ready for our next adventure?" Nicole asked, the question laden with all the possibilities that stretched before them. Laura squeezed her hand, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "Always." Above them, the city buzzed with possibility, the sky deepening to indigo at its edges. Below, the office lights flickered on, one by one, signaling the start of another night, and 1,000 stories yet to be written. Nicole smiled, letting the future unfold, no longer afraid of what it might bring. Whatever came next, whether more impossible transformations or simply the everyday magic of a life well-lived, she would face it with open arms and the knowledge that sometimes, the most extraordinary changes lead to the most beautiful destinations. The world was wide open, full of code yet to be written, bugs yet to be discovered, and adventures yet to be had. And Nicole Wolf, once Nick, now entirely herself, couldn't wait to see what happened next. The end.